Now you're very welcome along to the Huddle Breakdown. It is a massive week in Celtic. It is Glasgow Derby week. We are just 4 days away from the biggest game of the season to date. Celtic take on Rangers. If Celtic win, as I've said, they are 6 points clear at the top of the table before the split. If Rangers win, they're level. So everything is riding on this game. And because it's such a big occasion, because it's a special occasion, we brought in the big guns. Alan Morrison, Juco James, you're with me as always.
Enda.
Hello. Yep. Howdy.
Hello.
But we also have another stato, is what I don't know. It seems to be the phrase that's thrown at these guys on YouTube.
Virgin is what we usually get.
Well, I can neither confirm nor deny whether that is true. I'm assuming because you guys all have children that it's probably not true. Ross from Bhoys Analytics, you are our special guest this week. How are you getting on?
I'm doing good, Enda. Thanks for having me on.
No worries at all. Bringing out the big guns, as I said. Look, this is a big week. This is a massive week. It really can't be. There's so many words you can use to describe this in terms of how massive this game potentially could be. Timelines have been full of Celtic goals, Celtic wins at Ibrox, Celtic wins at Celtic Park, videos, montages, all the sorts coming across. So, in terms of your nerves, Ross, for this game, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I hadn't really, I think, felt it till today. I think with the international break ending, and you kind of go back from your kind of, for me, Scotland mode back into kind of Celtic mode. That's what we're looking at. And then obviously today the timelines were filled with different information pouring out, which I'm sure we maybe will discuss a bit later on. But yeah, starting to feel the nerves now. It does feel like this is it. If you win this game, it becomes very, very difficult for them to even make any sort of comeback with so few points left on the board and them having to come to Celtic Park. So yeah, very, very nervous. Is this really? I mean, this could doesn't make or break our season, but it does make or break their season, which is what I think is adding all the importance to this game. So yeah, looking forward to it. Very nervous. It's going to be a long few days getting to the Sunday afternoon.
The picture of Alfredo Morelos on crutches in the airport, I presume, is what you're alluding to there. Whether or not he is going to be injured for this game is still unconfirmed. There was a statement from the Colombian FA on the 26th of March saying that he would not take part in their games because of a thigh injury. So the potential for him to be out injured for this game could be actually true. That photo, whether or not that's recent or not, he actually could miss this game through injury. But we'll come back to Rangers later on and how they're going to set up. Alan, I think the last game, if we take it back to the last derby, the 3-0 win, that's probably as emotional as I've seen you about a game of football in the aftermath of it. The reaction to it was very emotive. Are you still feeling the buzz that you were feeling after that game? Are you still feeling as confident? Because I remember the main thing you brought up was the mindset of the two sets of teams and whether or not Rangers mentally are strong enough to chase Celtic down for the title. So if Celtic do win this game, do you still feel the same way?
Yeah, no, it was obviously great to be there, and because of where I live and circumstances, I only get usually to see a handful of games in the flesh a season, so it was special to go back and the first game after COVID as well for me, and obviously just the whole nature of the night was very special. So that all kind of rubbed off. The comment about pressure and ability to handle wasn't really an emotional response. That was based on fact, based on history of how they've tended to deal with pressure in the Scottish context at the tail end of the season. Other than the COVID season, which I think was extraordinary in many ways. So that was the question in my mind, how would they handle having pressure applied by Celtic? And I think I said, to be fair, that if Celtic could get, a sizable gap, maybe 5-6 points, then I honestly didn't see them being able to close that. And to be fair, they haven't, but, they're still within 3, it's really 4 points with the goal difference. So in terms of nerves, emotions, I'm going through the same cycle I always go through, which is I'm finding ways during the week to convince myself of why Celtic are the better team and will win. And then when I wake up on Sunday morning, I'll be feeling completely negative and worried and completely stressed about it. That's kind of the normal cycle that I kind of go through. I'm sure it'll be exactly the same this time.
I did a preview yesterday with the guys from Enda Celts, their podcast, and I was telling them that my pre-match routine is going to be a little bit different this weekend because the game's at 12, but my sister's brother is getting married at 2 o'clock on Sunday. So my mood at the wedding is going to be largely based upon the result of this game, and I probably won't actually get to see it properly. Really, I'll be watching it in the hotel room before the wedding. James, what's your pre-match routine for this? Because it's 12 o'clock on a Sunday. That's quite early for you. Is that what's that 6 o'clock in the morning for you?
Well, you guys just set your clocks forward, I think, on Sunday, right? So we've had different daylight savings the last few years. So yeah, we're back to 5 hours behind you on the East Coast. So that's a 7 a.m. kick for me. My normal routine is my dogs get me up around 6 a.m. no matter what the day is. They for some reason they don't realize it's the weekend. So I'll probably get up right at 6 and start my routine of coffee making, bathroom visitation to make to that I'm fully evacuated in time for kickoff.
That's enough now.
Yeah. So that, but the nice part about it is that I wake up to the lineups already being out. So that's the one upside of that, the anticipation of getting to see the lineup. So there have been times where I'll wake up at 5 or 5:15 just because of the anticipation and the nerves, and then it's like, what am I doing up so early? And then by then you can't go back to sleep and you're waiting that extra like half hour till the lineups come out. That's the grind. So I'm hoping I get to sleep until 6 a.m. That's the goal.
Surely the beers will have been in the fridge all night, so they should be pretty cool.
You know what? If I go somewhere, which I did look, but just family circumstances, I'll on occasions travel for one of these to Manhattan or Philly and stay overnight the night before, and then it's a totally different routine because you're right. Then I got to get up at like 5 so that I can start that whole process of coffee, bathroom, and then get to the point where I'm all ready to go to start drinking right when they open the door to the pub at 7 a.m. So you got to backdate the whole routine depending on where I'm at. And
you go up to the parlor? Is it the parlor bar? Do you go up to the parlor bar in New York?
No, I've always gone to Jack Dempsey's. Now New York, the NYCF's CSC has moved from the parlor down in the Midtown.
No, I did know that.
Yeah. So I might check that out. I'd never gotten up that far because it was up on, I don't know, like 70 something street, which is a bit of a haul if you're staying in Midtown. Because I walk everywhere when I'm in Manhattan. I hate taking trains and stuff. But so yeah, that's the routine. It'll be me and the dogs. That'll be it.
Yeah. A little bit more tame than everyone else in Scotland, I would imagine. You mentioned the starting lineups there. That's probably the main talking point. So we'll kick into that for this game. I don't want to spend too much time on the Giakoumakis versus Kyogo thing because I mean, all logic tells me that Kyogo's not going to be playing in this game. But Tom Rogic was pictured in training today, and his injury didn't seem as serious as Kyogo's or as Turnbull's. So it seems that he's going to be at least in the matchday squad for this game. Ross, I know you're a big Matt O'Reilly fan. He was playing for Denmark in the international break as well. Are you a Matt O'Reilly ahead of Tom Rogic, regardless of whether Tom Rogic's fit, or how do you see the midfield shaping up for this one?
Yeah, I think the Matt O'Reilly over Tom Rogic debate, especially for these types of games where we might not dominate as much, I think having the legs in the middle of the park as well as his much stronger defensive ability really helped Celtic out. I think that showed in the last game, his ability to take the ball and control it and really put Rangers under pressure quite a lot, really told. But when we look at the day, I mean, much like James Allen, we've got some access to Stats Bomb now. When you compare O'Reilly and Rogic, the kind of differences in the profile of player are quite large, especially when it comes to the pressuring, winning the ball back, counter pressures. It does seem like kind of O'Reilly fits into that kind of Maeda fold of that's the kind of player we're directly looking for, which is what you guys have been talking about since Ange kind of came in, that's what's going to be happening in January. It's a lot of confidence to see that's the type of player we're going for, and it's quite exciting for summer because we're probably going to bring in more guys that are much more like this. But things like Tom Rogic getting has over 5 turnovers per game. That's the worst in the league. O'Reilly's only in the 18th percentile, but he's only doing it 2 times per 90. So Roderick's way ahead of probably anyone in the league because he's taking a lot of risks in his first touch, trying to beat the man, with a dribble. So he's getting pretty poor numbers in those. But if he is successful, you're going to create a much better chance. But things like pressures, pressure regains, possession adjusted interceptions, O'Reilly's above the 70th percentile for all of these. Roderick's around the 20th. I think one of the main ones is the tackle/dribble pass percentage. Like O'Reilly isn't getting bypassed at all. Really, he's up 96th percentile, Roderick 44th percentile. He's getting bypassed much more. He's still got the physical frame to kind of stop people running by him, but he doesn't have the mobility if they get away from him to really stop them. So that's my main worry. For what Roderick offers that O'Reilly doesn't, it's not a huge difference. He's a bit more savvy on the ball. We like to try and dribble and progress the ball himself a bit more. But for the overall game, and I think the suitability for the game against the opponents, I don't really know why you would go Roderick over O'Reilly in this case. I'm not too sure what the other guys think, but I think I know what Alan thinks in the O'Reilly set for O'Reilly. But I've tended to agree with him when he's talked about the kind of on the podcast before in respect to that.
Yeah, Alan, one of the things that springs to mind with the pressures that Ross alludes to there in the previous derby is the first 20 minutes where Celtic they were hounding the Rangers players in their own third, and they just could not get out, and it was constantly coming back to Celtic. It was constant pressure. Hatate was switching the ball quickly then to maintain the momentum going forward. Is that a game plan you see Celtic going for again?
Well, yes, because I don't think Postecoglou will do what 99% of managers would do in this situation, which is, pick a very pragmatic team and just say to Rangers, you have to win, and therefore we'll make it as difficult as possible for you. That is the normal football paradigm in these situations. But we know that Postecoglou will not follow that paradigm. He will follow his own way. So irrespective of what I think they should do, that's what he's going to do, right? So it's going to be a normal attack. Success will come through trying to play attacking football and putting the opponent on the back foot. That is the philosophy, and that's not going to change. Now, that's not to say it's dogma and that it's just going to be like an all-out attacking at any cost. We know that that's not true either. There will be tweaks and there will be adjustments made to find weaknesses in the opponent. And for me, I completely agree with what Ross said. Not surprisingly, on O'Reilly, I said last week that I thought the team that started against Ross County was what Postecoglou's got on his mind to start that game, and I still stand by that. Now, there's a couple of doubts there. Maeda maybe has a rumoured to have a little knock. But I think O'Reilly would start ahead of Rogic for that game, even though Rogic started against Ross County for the reasons that Ross said. I think they will pack the midfield with workers. They may even play 3 at the back and have 5 in midfield with Tavernier and on one side, and possibly I'm not even sure who they'd put as left wing back, to be honest.
Probably Bassey.
Maybe Bassey, yeah. And you're going to have Jack, Lundstrom, and possibly Aribo. So 3 quite robust, strong tacklers. So I think you want to be as athletic as you can. But the trouble for them, I think, will be a creativity gap.
James, if we do go for the midfield that played against Ross County, that would be to assume that Cal McGregor is the 6 and Hatate is going to start this again. And obviously this was the game that Hatate announced himself as a Celtic player last time and was so just absolutely amazing in that game. Is that something that you think is the right suit for this game, or would you prefer to see Beaton coming in as the 6 and McGregor pushed up as the 8? Which one do you think would suit this game better?
Yeah, I think assuming that Alan's thesis is correct, and I agree with him that we're going to play the way we play. I would say sticking with McGregor there makes sense. I'm actually a little bit flipped to Alan, so my anxiety is actually right now because my analytical build up to this has got me very concerned and nervous. Which we can get into. I'll probably get more optimistic the morning of as my carnal urges start to take over. So I think we talked about this last week briefly, relatively briefly, is that one of the big variables here is the nature with which GVB's been managing them, and we really don't have a good. I would be surprised if the Celtic staff has a good handle on what. I don't mean that intellectually, meaning that predicting how they're going to set up is not easy right now. There's a pretty good unknown. So I think we'll just do what we do, and then there might be some period of adjustment that takes place and tweaks that go tactically depending on how they come out. Because as Alan said, I could see them doing 3 at the back. I could see them going 4-2-3-1. I could see all kinds of different variations, especially if Morelos is out. Which, when you mentioned, I'm not sure why a pulled hamstring would result in crutches. So that I didn't see that because I've been busy with other stuff today online. But so if Morelos is out, do they go with Roof? Do they go with Sakala at the 9? Do they, who's at the right wing? Where's Aribo fit in? Is it Kamara at the 10 in the 4-2-3-1 like we talked about, like they've done recently? All of these kind of iterations and questions, I think, are far more pronounced on their side. And I suspect, as you guys have been saying, it's probably going to be, barring some kind of issue with Maeda starting, it'll probably be the Ross County side that lines up. And I don't have any problem with that, given the way that we'll probably try to play the game.
Yeah, well, the greatest signing in the history of the SPFL may also be out injured for this game. There's rumours that Aaron Ramsey won't be available for selection for Rangers either. So again, that changes everything. If you look at their team that beat Dundee in their last league fixture, Aaron Ramsey started on the right. Ryan Jack wasn't even playing in that game. If Morelos is out injured, that makes an impact on their team as well. So you're talking maybe Aribo coming in, maybe Roof as well. Ryan Jack almost certainly will start this game, considering the impact he had on the second half of the derby last time. So yeah, there's a lot of variables in their starting lineup.
Yeah, so I think you can throw out the first 2 derbies of this season, meaning that the first one was completely different given the turnover in personnel and who played for Celtic, and they had a lot of people out at the time with a COVID thing and whatever. And then this last game, if you look at, as I went back this week, I rewatched the game. I mean, they had Diallo on the right, Roof at striker, and a midfield 3 of Arfield, who's been one of their worst midfielders this season, by the way. And Aribo and Kamara. And you had Bassi at center back and what's his face at left
Shite-bag.
Yeah, shite bag. That's right, as McGregor would say. So I think minimally you're going to see 4, if not 5. I think either it'll be Balogun or Hollander that comes in at center back, Bassi at left back, probably Jack and Lundstrom in the midfield with maybe Kamara, and then my guess is Aribo out wide right, and then either Sakala or Roof through the middle. So that's a totally different setup. And if you think about where we typically attack, down that left, where we had the triangles of Hatate, Jota, Taylor and McGregor floating that side, who were they going up against? Diallo, Arfield, right? With Roof, who is not, all that good at pressing and tracking back and playing in a defensive. So that little pocket in where we do a lot of our activity was not facing anywhere near what we could if they have a different lineup, regardless of whether it's a 5 in the midfield, as Alan said, or whether they go 4-2-3-1. So yeah, I think this is going to be a completely different kettle of fish, as they say, just based off of, unless there's some kind of weird selection, which again, who knows, that because he's quite creative, shall we say, I'll be generous in how he goes about setting up at times. But I'd be surprised if it's not some mixture of what I mentioned.
What about Celtic's forward line then, Ross? If we go with Alan's prediction, it'll be Jota, Giakoumakis and Maeda up front for Celtic. Last time around, it was a bat on the right wing, and himself and Juranovic absolutely tore Barisic to threads that night, and he obviously got the third goal. So for you, is it Jota on the right, Maeda on the left, and Jack off front, or does Abada come into the questioning?
Well, with Bassi back on the left-hand side, Bassi's very athletic, very strong, very difficult player to actually dribble past. He ranks in the kind of top percentile for preventing that kind of thing. Barisic not as much, so Abada got quite a good amount of success, and the movement on that side really just exposed his lack of athleticism completely. But Jota's up against Tavernier. Tavernier ranks, he's kind of middling for getting dribbled past, and Jota's main attribute, if you could say, is actually beating players 1v1. And if they do go with the 5 at the back, which I'm starting to think there's a generally quite decent chance they might do that if he's trying to change things up, to really change things up to how the last derby went, he could do that. And then you've got a situation where you're pretty much going to have Jota 1v1 against Tavernier the whole game on that side. So do I want to have maybe Jota on the right-hand side when he could be up against Tavernier, and he's going to get much more joy out of that? And maybe Maeda's, again, also probably a better matchup against Bassi. With he's not a big dribbler, so he's looking to try and beat him with his movement. Bassi's weaknesses defensively are more getting caught ball watching, not tracking runners, or just making more basic headers in his game, with him being maybe a bit more youthful. So I was actually more leaning towards having Jota in his natural position, and then having Maeda on the right. Keeps him more on his natural side, so if he can whip in these crosses, he can, but he can still do the same runs on that side. However, the striker is Giacomakis or Kyogo. It doesn't really make a difference. I actually think when they're both in the box, they profile very similarly. Obviously, Kyogo's a bit better, and he's a lot better at the all-round game. But I think what we want the Celtic striker to do in this game is really just put the ball in the back of the net, especially if we are going to be maybe not as direct or sitting on top of them as much, especially not sitting on top of them as much as we did in the last game. So I was leaning towards Jota on the left and Maeda on the right, with whatever striker through the middle. Interested to see what the guys think about that, just based on what I've looked up from the data and where I think they sit.
Yeah, I think it's a conundrum. I think, as James says, we genuinely don't know what they're going to do, whereas I think we do know what we're going to do. But I think for the reasons that James mentioned there, I do quite like the idea that their right may well be a little bit more stacked defensively in this game, and actually Maeda, who's not going to get involved in a huge amount of build-up, making those runs is maybe a good, because Taverni's better going forward than defensively. So him running off Tavernier I quite like, and the idea of the movement and pace of Jota, O'Reilly and Juranovic on the right-hand side, really testing Bassi's concentration with movement and quick ball cycling. I like this. I like the possibility of that. So I'm kind of I kind of can see both. I can see all sides of that, but I really don't know what they're going to do. But I'm becoming more and more convinced that Postecoglou will have an answer to whatever way they set up, and will make small adjustments. He won't just sit on his hands. He won't wait to the 75th minute like some managers of recent years and do nothing to change the flow of it. If he sees it, he'll change it, I think.
Given what we've been saying so far and the general season as it has been, we pretty much know the starting 11. We pretty much know how we're going to play in relation to that starting 11. Whereas with Rangers, we're sort of discussing, could they play 3 at the back? Could they play 5 at the back? And one of the biggest psychological things going into these games, is cup finals as well, is that you should never change away from your routine. So you shouldn't, if you have a cup final, you shouldn't turn up 3 hours earlier just because it's a cup final. You should, go through your normal pre-match routine as normal, so that it feels as normal as possible. So in a way, does Celtic have an advantage going into this game, that they are so settled in what they're doing that, the Rangers players don't know really what way they're going to be playing based on a European game, based on a league game, based on a cup game, based on the Celtic game, whereas Celtic are kind of going out here, doing what they have been doing for the entire season so far.
I think, as I said last week, I think that this setup introduces a lot of variability, meaning that that's certainly a plausible scenario. But they have been playing this way to a significant degree since the winter break, meaning that as logically, he get thrown in. I think his first game managed was November 28th, at least in the league. And, with the flurry of December games, similar to Celtic, there's not a whole lot of time for strategic practicing and putting things in. So as they've come out of that winter break, and if you look at what they have done in Europe, they've been dynamic, maybe is a word, flexible. They seem to have come out 4-2-3-1, and then if they get a lead, then they kind of drop back into more of a 5 at the back or 5 in the midfield, that type of thing. So I mean, that would be my guess. Like my guess is that they won't start 3-5-2 or 3-5-1-1 or whatever you want to call it. My guess is they will go 4-2-3-1, and then maybe switch if they get a lead. At least that'll be their plan, is my guess. Because again, that's kind of what they've done against Dortmund and against Belgrade. So there's some familiarity relative to that because they've already been doing it against similar level opposition. But you're right. I mean, the duration is not as long as obviously the Celtic players have had with our system. But again, I think the other aspect of this, because it's so fresh, is because we haven't really seen these players play this way against each other. I mean, you've got, if it's Hatate, O'Reilly, and Maeda, those are 3 hugely important players that won't have faced Rangers setting up this way, and particularly with the personnel. So it's almost like a completely fresh dynamic, I think. So I think that freshness is going to be in both directions to a large degree. So I find this fascinating analytically. I mean, to me, I think it's very interesting to see what unfolds.
Ross, we've been doing the play breakdowns together for the last couple of weeks, and one person in particular, I can't remember if it was the second person, have been saying that we're basically doing the opposition's job, doing the showing what Celtic are doing well or showing what Celtic are doing badly. But so let's pretend we're a Rangers scout for this week. What are you looking at from a Celtic perspective? Where can Celtic damage Rangers? Where would a Ranger scout be looking at Celtic and saying, okay, this is where we need to pay attention to?
Well, I think from the Ranger Scout, which they will definitely have people hired to do that job. Always very fun to see.
They're not relying on Celtic podcasters to do it for them.
I'd imagine a lot of the focus of their work will be on trying to counter what Maeda is doing on the wing. He's a player that's new into the team. When he only played, I think, 20-25 minutes against Rangers in the home game, they won't have as much information on him as the rest of the team, especially in the wide areas. So I imagine quite an extensive bit of work will have been done into seeing how he plays and operates and how he tries to move off players and trying to find ways to counteract that, whether it's having the centre-back being a bit quicker to identify if he's getting him behind the full-back and coming over to cover, and just trying to figure out how to try and nullify his threat. I think also maybe looking at how they try and play out from the back is going to be a very big one. I think at Celtic Park, they were awful at trying to play out from the back. They tried it quite a few times and it ended up just going long to an isolated roof. So I think with Maeda starting as well, trying to break that initial press is something they're going to have to really look at trying to do. I think they're going to have much more ability to do that with Ryan Jack back in the side and Lindstrom being a bit more mobile. So it's going to be really important that Hatate, O'Reilly or Rogic and Giacomakis, if he's up top, kind of come in and close that gap, get these pressing traps working, and especially see if we do it early on and hit their confidence. Especially if the ball's coming to Tavernier or Bassey, they're just going to try and go long up the wing very quickly, and that's what we're trying to look for. Try and hit them at their flow of what they're trying to do, and push on to the game what we want to do. So I think that's the areas I'd be looking at if I was Rangers, trying to play out through our press and looking at players they'd maybe not seen as much in Maeda.
Do you go along with that, Alan?
I just need to so Ross, did you just say that you thought Lundstrom was had increased mobility? And I'm saying this.
It's our field.
I used to watch Lundstrom down the lane in Sheffield for quite a while. But he is literally a lump of wood. even in Championship level, he wasn't the most mobile. But no, listen. I mean, I did a little piece on this in the week in sense of what are the weaknesses that other teams are trying to exploit in Celtic. And for the rest of the SPFL, it's loading high balls onto Starfelt and Taylor on the basis that Starfelt is relatively speaking weak in the air and has a very low aerial percentage dual win rate for a centre half, and also Taylor's recovery pace is less than Juranovic, for example, in terms of there's often a gap there in the left if Taylor's been wandering up the line as he often does. So I don't suspect they will be lumping long high diagonals onto the top of Starfelt, in all honesty. So I think it will be trying to, as Ross says, break that initial press and then almost play on the counter with Kent and Morelos as they do in Europe. But I think for me the really fascinating aspect of this game is that the way that both teams want to play is not the way that they should play and are going to play, right? And what I mean by that is I think they are most comfortable with the personnel that they have and historically over the last 2 or 3 seasons, and the results show this, they're more comfortable playing a European away game or even a home game against a good opponent than they are trying to break down a packed defence. Whereas we know that, and so for them, they don't want to be going out for a win. Okay, this is where they come unstuck in run-of-the-mill SPFL games where they're playing against a packed defence. So they want to play a more counter-attacking game. They want to be solid in their own defensive structure. Whereas Celtic don't need to win the game, frankly, and therefore, in terms of the way they should play by the normal paradigms, it should be a fairly compact Celtic, but we know they're not going to do that. So I think both teams are going to play opposite to the way that they actually should, given the circumstances of the match. I think that's the fascinating aspect of it.
Logically, that does make sense to me. If I'm a Scottish team, I'm targeting Celtic's left side of defence, especially just because of the height of Greg Taylor as well as his lack of mobility. In previous years, and I could be completely wrong with this, but I seem to remember Aribo causing Celtic quite a lot of issues over the last number of years down that right-hand side. He could start in this, James. Is that somewhere that you think they're going to try target as well, the left-hand side of Celtic's defence, maybe trying to go at them and get Starfelt on his back foot and try turn him and try turn Greg Taylor and things like that?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the Sophie's choice for Celtic to a degree, which is if we try to impose that high line with the center backs, then that creates a dynamic of, if they do break out of the press, that transition and the pace that they might be able to offer could be threatening. And versus if we play a little bit more reserved, not quite as high of a line, then that creates that extra space for somebody like Kent to drop in to the half space or like a Rebo and kind of facilitate those transitions. And I think that's the upside of Morelos. If he doesn't play, is that's one of the things that he's been pretty good at, is dropping into those spaces and kind of being the fulcrum to, for them to play off of in transition. So yeah, I think our left side is the obvious place that people would target. And again, this is where I go back to that prior game where the triangle of attacking players was Diallo, Arfield, and Roof. And, that just didn't work for a variety of reasons. And I think they're unlikely to replicate that. And not only in the personnel side, but also from a structure. I mean, they kind of played that really the 4-3-3. I mean, they set up in Gerard's 4-3-3 in that game, and they've been going more towards a 4-2-3-1. So that that introduces a little bit different dynamics as far as who's dropping in where and who's where in those transitions potentially. The other thing I would say is, I hope they try to play out from the back, because McGregor is awful on the ball. And the flip side of that is I hope they don't press us high. I rewatched the game. They did not press us high until the 37th minute in the first half. They basically sat back and, kind of that, again, I joked, the Frankenstein. They kind of played that midfield block, the mid block, like Gerard had for the most part in the 4-3-3. And as soon as they pressed us high, we, our deficiencies at the back. So I hope, obviously I hope Maeda's fit, and I hope they decide to try and play out from the back, because McGregor, in some ways similar to Hart, is a bomb scare waiting to go off when he's trying to play out from the back, and they're both quite distressed when they get put under pressure when they kick long, meaning that they're if they have time, they're okay long kicking, particularly Hart's quite good long kicking when he's got the time, but you put pressure on both of them and the ball gets turned over pretty regularly. So I think that's going to be another component, which is which team actually can press high up, and which of the two teams, if that does happen, actually tries to play through it versus just go along with it. Because again, to Alan's point, I think probably both teams from a risk management perspective in this kind of game should probably go longer more so than trying to play through it, because I don't think either team is, given the strengths of the other's opponent and the matchup, should really be trying to play out from the back that aggressively.
Mm-hmm. We mentioned goalkeepers as well in our Q&A last week about coming to claim things and Hart's ability to do that, and almost the game management and positionings based on that. James, just top of my head now that I'm actually on this topic, one of the things we mentioned with Hart before is the gap between the defense and Hart in his starting position. Have you noticed any difference in that since we had that discussion a couple of months ago? Has he improved on that, or is that something we still need to look at? Because if you're counter-attacking, that's where you're going to get pleasure, is if the gap is too big between defense and goalkeeper.
Yeah, it's more, I wouldn't say it's necessarily improving. It's just, for the most part, he's not playing in that, advanced, really high up. Now, he has a little bit against, Ross County when they were down to 10 men kind of situation. That he's been way out. But if you just looked at how Bain played in the preseason, or looked at how Ange's keepers played in Japan, I mean, you're talking a good 10, 15 yards of advanced placement versus where Hart's been. But I think we've squeezed teams so much in pressing and counter pressing that most teams, particularly domestically, do not have the ability to kind of try to capitalize on that. And to their credit, I think Carter Vickers and Starfelt have gotten a lot better at anticipating that and positioning for it, and being ready for it. So I think that the gap's still there, but it's a tough thing to capitalize on. I mean, it really took somebody that's well drilled and skilled and talented like Alkmaar to try and capitalize on it. And would that be part of the toolkit that Rangers might look to exploit? I mean, possible, but again, then you're getting back to who's delivering that long ball. I don't see McGregor being a keeper that's going to ping those kind of balls with any kind of frequency.
Yeah, he's still oddly good at shot stopping though for a goalkeeper of his age and size. I mean, his beer belly sort of moves with him when he's diving, but he still manages to take it over to the shots in some sort of an agile way. Ross, does the idea of this being an Ibrox, does that change anything in terms of Celtic's approach to the game for you?
Well, we've seen from Ange that he just doesn't care where the games are played. He's going to play his way regardless.
It's Glasgow, mate.
It's Glasgow. I mean, it's went from 20 degrees. I think it was 20 degrees yesterday and snowed yesterday. So it's a volatile place already. So I'm pretty sure he's going to go out and he's going to attack them. And if he gets a goal early, with the way their kind of mental state is, they could crumble very quickly, especially if they try and come out onto us and leave spaces in behind where our attacking players can really start hurting them. So I'm quietly confident going into the game. I'd say if you're probably looking at a betting market, I'd say both teams are probably even on paper because they're at home. But I'm quietly confident going into it. I think Ange has a system. He knows exactly how he wants to play, and I think on the other side of Glasgow, they're still trying to figure out what their best formation and best starting 11 is, and I think that's always going to be a huge advantage. On top of that, they've got injuries. The Nigerian trio had a really tough time on international break. I'm sure we've all seen the horrible scenes out there. So he's got all sorts of things that he's got to deal with players coming back and getting them back into the right mindset for this game. So I think it really should be a game where we come out high energy, get on top of them, and see if we can knock their confidence early on like we did at Celtic Park, because I think they're there for the taking and the league's there for the taking this weekend.
Well, that was one thing that Celtic definitely did last time, and they clearly had a game plan to sit back and try to get Celtic on the counter attack in the first game, but everyone has a good plan until you get punched in the face, and they got punched in the face multiple times by Celtic in the first 20 minutes, and suddenly the game was completely done, and they had nothing really to bring to the table. So if Celtic do go 1-0 up in this, what sort of approach do you think they're going to bring? Are they going to come out of this, in which case that will open them up, or do you think they'll still sit back and look for a counter attack, or what do you think?
I think regardless, when we went 1-0 up at Celtic Park, nothing really changed because the momentum of the game was with us. The only real momentum shift in the game was when half-time came, and when you're 3-0 up at half-time and you're playing still a fairly dangerous opponent with some good players on their side, you're looking to control the game, very much limit chances, and make sure they're doing a lot of running and a lot of hard running, which is very demoralising when you're behind. So I think if we go 1-0 up, especially if it's in the same half, it's going to be very much the same. It's going to be trying to look to kill the game off as they try and push further up the park. Even if they go from pushing up 5-10 yards, that's more space for much more mobile forwards to exploit, and behind what I imagine will be a Goldson Balogun combo, which can be exploited as they can get caught ball watching, or maybe just don't have the pace or strength to match Giakoumakis or Maeda. So I think unless we're a few goals up at halftime, it's very much going to be intensity. But I guess the main worry is you get to the 60th, 70th minute, it's 0-0, and then you're looking at what kind of subs we're going to bring. What kind of subs we're going to bring on to keep the intensity going, or if the game's going to come much more under a more controlled kind of manner in that kind of area of the game. So I think that's kind of the one thing. Maybe it'd be kind of good to discuss what happens if the game is 0-0 after 60 minutes, and maybe Celtic have tired a bit more than them because they've sat in and absorbed pressure. So I think that's my one worry, is we don't get ahead, because if we let them kind of come back into the game with the crowd and things like that, and they get on top of us and they're launching balls into the box, and if it looks like it will be, Roof playing, that's his main asset as a player, is box movement and trying to get a yard of space in front of a centre back. So I think there's some worries in my head, but I think if we get the first goal, I just don't see us dropping points.
Do you want to come in on that, Al?
I'm just pinching myself. We're not used to having this positivity. Normally we've got me and James worrying about everything that can go wrong for a good hour. So this positivity is kind of just taking me by surprise, and breath of fresh air. Because if you look at all the variability, and we talk about this all the time, the variability is all on their side pretty much for this game, in terms of, as Ross said, in terms of injury concerns, doubts as to the approach and the setup and the tactics and the formation at the most basic level. There's going to be there's a lot of different options. We can't settle on one here, and we've looked at it a lot. In terms of pressure, the pressure of the occasion is all on them. Martin O'Neill said that this morning, and he would know that is a really important factor, actually. The impetus and the impetus to do something and to make something happen, and the pressure of the occasion is all on them. In terms of the state of the Celtic squad, the improvement in the cohesion that the players have demonstrated over, especially since January, we're also seeing the variance fairy is sprinkling variance positive dust on Celtic, to the extent of, we've seen a few deflected goals go in, a few positive, decisions, etc. All of those things accumulate and are mainly in Celtic's favour for this match. So that's all good. I think I worry about set pieces, because again, it's clearly where Celtic are not as strong. We're not a physically tall team. They are generally above average in terms of exploiting set piece situations, and obviously with Tavernier, you've got somebody who can deliver very well from set pieces, and obviously the ability to win free kicks is certainly there as well. So that's obviously the piece, because that you don't need to have expensive players to head the ball in from a free kick. You know what I mean? That tends to be a bit of a leveler in the matches. We've seen it all throughout the SPFL. So that would be my kind of main concern. But as I say, all the pressure and all the sort of doubt and negative variance. Will Morelos play 1T? I don't really care one way or another from a Celtic perspective whether he does play, but I think it would be a real blow for them psychologically if he didn't, being their top scorer. His record against Celtic's really poor. So that all makes it positive in my mind. But as I say, set pieces probably is the nagging doubt for me.
Yeah. Without going into too much detail or conspiracy theories about it, Willie Collum is the referee for the game this weekend. If you're talking about positive variance, assuming that Rangers will get a penalty in this game, what do you want Celtic's XG to be at before that?
The Willie Collum experience.
Yeah, every club's had one.
It's so this goes back to some of the prep work I've done. Looking at stuff, not work, but looking at stuff, getting ready for the game. We've pretty reliably been conceding. If you back out Jablonec, so pretty much European opposition better than Jablonec. We've averaged right around 1.5 in XG conceded, which is uncomfortably high. Now, some of that's tilted because of Betis and Leverkusen, but Alkmaar posted a game that was really high. Michelin as well. Bodo Glimt was right at around 1 both games. So if you throw a penalty into the mix, these two teams I think are so well matched from a talent and from a resource perspective that it's fine margins. And as we saw even in the first game, I going back and rewatching the last game, and we talk about game state. I mean, a deflected shot goes in, right? That was good luck. It was an angled deflected shot from distance, so that happens. And Aribo has a pass that if it's a foot to the right, Arfield's through on a one-on-one with Hart. Right, those two incidents in that game early, if they flip, which would be easily could have flipped just from a variance perspective, and all of a sudden, is it a different game? So these you say, oh well, ifs and buts, right? Well, even with a 3-0 game, I think the stats bomb XG, and some of this was a lot late with a header from Goldson, but our XG was only 1.15. So these are really closely matched teams, and the Willie Collum experience. If there's an early yellow against one of our defenders or McGregor, for example, or a red, you can't discount that, or a penalty. These kinds of things could be hugely important, even more so than in a normal game because of how close these two teams are. So I think I dread his involvement, just like I dread any of the refs. But I think him specifically, he's so unpredictable. Like he's just unpredictably bad. I think he's so crazy with some of his stuff. Like, and I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to it. Whereas you could maybe put together theories with some of the other ones directionally. I just think he's an authentically terrible ref, and that can fall in any kind of way. And this is not the game for us to have that kind of risk, unfortunately.
As I've said before, I go into it probably naively in thinking that the referees are just bad. There are a couple of referees in Scotland where I could point out in a Celtic Rangers game that no, maybe there's a bit of bias in there as well. But Willie Collum to me is just hilariously bad for a professional referee. It's incredible that he's managed to keep his refereeing license at this level. But we'll move on. The penalty situation. Sometimes I think the social media manager for the Rangers Twitter, he does a warm up as well as the players, so he has that penalty to Rangers card ready to go, and it's out within 2 seconds of the thing going out. But Ross, since you're our special guest, the guys love this section. They really like when I ask them for a prediction for the game because it's the easiest thing in the world to do. So I'll let you go first on this one. What's your prediction for the game this Sunday?
I'm going to go 2-1 Celtic. Let's go. Very positive. We'll go 2-0 up in the first half.
That's the shortest answer I've ever had on the predicting session.
is.
Usually I get some long convoluted answer and then it doesn't even give me a prediction in the end. So thank you for that. Alan, I'll start the clock now. You have
he's absolutely showing us up because you're spot on, and normally I kind of rattle on, and I can see that your eyes are kind of drooping, and then I avoid giving a prediction at all. It works every time. Oh, I don't know. I'm going to go 2-0 Celtic. I'm going to be pretty positive.
James?
I'm going to go 2-2, which, by the way, I'd be thrilled with.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can get a draw. I've said this already. Celtic go into this with all the power. If they draw, they're still in the driver's seat. If they win, they're 6 points clear. So I'm confident going in. 2-1 to Ross, 2-0 for Alan, 2-2 for James. I've been 2-1 for the last couple of days, so I'm going to stick with that 2-1, and it's going to be a Rangers penalty in there somewhere. 2-1 to Celtic, I should say.
Great minds.
So yeah, anything else you just want to bring up before we finish up the derby preview?
The only thing I'll say, and again, I wrote an article on this. I think part of my anxiety is I can attribute, to me, there's always a risk in analysis about arbitrary endpoints, right? You pick this time and to that time, and you can, do all kinds of crap to conform. What I did, using what I thought was reasonable logic, meaning that coming out of the winter break, it's 11 games, so you're basically looking at one cycle through the league. Obviously not the same home and away, but it's a decent trip through the league. And both teams having been relatively settled coming out of the winter break. It is basically, that's why I say they're so, the results have been quite different, but the underlying metrics have been unbelievably comparable, like shockingly so. And to me, that is different than the narrative coming into the game, right? The narrative is, Rangers have not been playing that well, and that they've been doing it in Europe but not domestically, whereas Celtic have been almost the opposite. We choked through domestically and did not do well against Bodo. So like I said, I think that these are so close, the two teams. And so that's what I'll end with. That's why I'm nervous, is because the kind of the fan experience, the normal fan experience, would understandably have us quite confident coming into this game. And I'm not saying I'm not confident or optimistic. It's just that I think the consensus is probably over optimistic relative to what I'm seeing analytically. To me, it's legitimately more of a coin flip game, or probably shaded because of the factors that we've talked about, maybe shaded a little bit in their direction from an analytical perspective. And if you look at the betting markets, that's how they have it. So I think in this case, the betting markets are probably relatively efficient.
Yeah, I think that's fair in terms of the underlying performance data. If you think that Celtic have won 9 and drawn 1 since January, and I think they've lost 1 obviously and drawn 3 or 4 maybe in that time, but actually the underlying, in terms of number of shots, XG, touches in the box, keeper saves by the opposition, all those kind of things, it's actually pretty level, to be fair. But what is the case? What I've been trying to sort of, putting all bias aside, what is the case for Rangers to win the game? And what we're trolling around looking at stuff from their own fans, and it seems to boil down to they're at home and they beat Dortmund. And that seems to be it, because like we've just shown, we can't show that this particular arrangement of players and this particular tactical formation is going to beat Celtic because we don't know, and they don't know either, because they don't know what they're going to put out. So I think that allied to the fact that, as I say, the reason that their performance data is good but the results haven't been good is that after 18 months of kind of positive variance on their side, that's kind of flipped a bit in the last couple of months, and hopefully that continues on Sunday. And the fact that all the pressure is on them suggests that it may do.
Well, it's sort of like the person who wears a nice fluffy coat out to the game on Sunday because they see that it's going to be cold. That's Celtic. So Celtic, they're assuming that everything's going to plan and they'll bring their nice coat. The Rangers fans aren't. They're hoping that it's going to be sunny, and it could well be sunny on Sunday, and they could be the ones having the last laugh. But I think Celtic are just more comfortable and more confident going into this game because they are more prepared, I would say, in the way that they do things and the way they go about. So I don't know. That's why I'm more comfortable with saying that Celtic are going to win this game. I just Celtic have stuck to a plan this entire time, and they're still sticking to the plan regardless of what position in the league they are. So generally, the teams that do that tend to do better over the longer course of a season. So we shall wait and see this Sunday. Ross, if people want to get your stuff, Bhoys Analytics on Twitter is where they can get you, and the Celtic Way as well, right?
Yeah, doing a bit of writing for Celtic Way, same as the other guys. And yeah, Bhoys Analytics, if you want to give me a follow, you can.
I almost feel like I should be getting a free subscription to the Celtic Way because Alan plugs it every week, you've plugged it a couple of times, James plugs it every week, and I'm still sitting here and not having a subscription to the Celtic Way. So maybe I should be getting a free subscription to that for giving them free advertisement every week on the show. I don't know. Maybe that's it. Anyway, guys, enjoy the game.
Thank you, guys.
No worries.
You too.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
too.
Take care.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Ross.
No worries. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers, Ross. And if you want to get the rest of our stuff, it is available on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast, or you can subscribe to the Breakdown Inc. YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. Get notified every time a video is live. We will be back again next week with the Derby review. So hopefully we'll have a win to review in that podcast next week. Enjoy the game, guys, on Sunday, and we'll chat to you then.